To start off this video, let's begin with a highly used way of ranking people: IQ tests. IQ stands for intelligence quotient, and IQ tests are designed to try and measure that. The first major test was designed by Alfred Binet to try and figure out which children in France needed more help in school. The way these tests work is by taking the score that an individual got on a test, dividing it by the average results for their age, and then multiplying it by 100, with the average for most people being around 100. Now this was all okay. It was designed to help children who needed help, it mostly didn't affect people negatively, and for the most part, it was a good test for the time it was made.
I think we all know where this is going, so let's just skip to the end.
One of the first ways that this test was misused was when some people looked at an IQ test that was used in the US military to try and assign positions, and interpreted the results to claim that ethnic minorities were less intelligent. Of course, without taking into account that most people from racial minorities were immigrants who didn't speak English well, and also didn't have an understanding of many American cultural references that were used in the test, because that sounded complicated, and they were showing Woodrow Wilson a really cool movie later that night. Along with this, it was also used by people who believed in eugenics to rationalize sterilizing people, and then the Nazis to rationalize killing children, which is a disgusting jump from giving children a test to genocide. I must say, not very high IQ. Thankfully, after World War II, it became less of a major way of categorizing people and more of a magical spell to recite to make sure no one talks to you at parties. For this one, I think I'm going to rank it C. An interesting test, but a terrible past.
Sometimes my genius it's almost frightening.
Now on to standardized tests. Standardized tests, for all of us who had extensive medical procedures to forget them, are tests that are administered and scored in a standard fashion, meaning the way that they're given out, the questions on the tests, and the way they're scored are consistent through a group of people, with one of the most well-known tests being the SAT. Now people usually take these in school, college, or university, and they do have flaws. For example, there have been some studies that show that people who get stressed during tests often perform lower in them, although it could be argued that part of a standardized test is to teach individuals how to perform well during times of stress. That being said, I would argue that the larger problem with standardized testing is that the United States and other countries use standardized testing a lot. This is because it was greatly increased during the early 2000s with the No Child Left Behind Act of 2002, which, oh hey, it's our old friend Bush. We haven't seen him since the last video where he allowed the creation of illegal surveillance programs. Must say, I haven't missed him much. Anyway, this was created in response to statistics that showed that American public education wasn't the best, and in an attempt for better results, increased standardized testing dramatically. To the shock of no one, this led to many teachers to teach in a way that would give children better marks, but made most classes glorified short-term memory tests. Back to ranking. Standardized testing, in moderation, is okay, so we'll give it a B. That's just enough to pass, but not enough to be loved by their parents. Okay, let's move on to something that requires less research. Meme formats. Now I know that most of these memes have been overused to the point that children, or as they're formerly known, senators, can make them, but I'm just going to ignore those memes and review what they originally were because I don't want those examples to exist. Meme formats are formats made to compare, contrast, or ridicule groups, ideas, or other pieces of our world. These formats have been around for hundreds of years, but of course with the explosion of creation brought about by the internet, more and more of these have been created, and as such, more opinions have been able to be expressed through them. As they have become more popular with the expansion of the internet, I believe that meme formats have become a great tool for free speech. Yes, you may portray me as the soy Jojack for adding this to my tier list, but by doing so, you only prove my point. Therefore, although I do not agree with every opinion portrayed on them, I believe them to be necessary to continue dialogue. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Oh, thank you. Thank you. What, you want me to be president? Well, thank you very much. So for all these reasons, this will be our first very clear S tier.
Great job putting those modern memes in there, Bergen. I'm sure this video will age well.
Okay, now we're just going to hop from the ice cream sundae, that is comparison memes, to the Vietnam War, which is the caste system. The caste system is part of Hinduism that's been around for thousands of years and divides people into 5 main groups at birth. These are then split up into 3,000 other castes and then into 25,000 subcastes, each based on a job. But that's not the important part, and I'll focus on the 5 main ones for the rest of this. The 5 main castes are Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Shudras, and Dalits, meaning broken or scattered, and are the lowest members of the caste system. I apologize if I mispronounced any of those. I've been trying for the last 30 minutes now. The caste system says that each group of people has jobs that are expected of them. Brahmins are meant to be intellectuals and teachers, yes, the caste of redditors. Kshatriyas are rulers and warriors. Vaishyas are farmers, traders, and merchants. Shudras are laborers, and Dalits are usually street sweepers, toilet cleaners, or other jobs that are viewed as unfavorable. Now, although this way of ranking people is over 3,000 years old, with it first being recorded around 1500 BC, the main reason it's still around is because how it was emphasized during the Mughal Empire and the British Raj. The British did this, along with a few other things, to maintain control, giving majority of administrative jobs to Christians and people in certain castes, while not to those in other castes. But social changes in the 1920s led to small changes in this practice, and then, in 1949, as India began to declare independence, negative discrimination on the basis of caste was banned as part of the Indian constitution, although it's still practiced in parts of India today. Doing research for this section, I found that a good part of it is that it passes down tradition. So if you ever want to discriminate against minorities under the pretext of preserving culture and tradition, become a Confederate. Wait, sorry, I meant to say subscribe to the ideas of the caste system. Sorry about that. With the one positive out of the way, there are many, many more negative side effects from this, with the overarching problem being that it creates discrimination rationalized by religion. And you can quote me when I say, discrimination is bad. Oh, thank you again. This discrimination makes it so that even today in some parts of India, Dalits are forced to use separate water fountains, are segregated with housing, and have a difficult time receiving emergency services. Along with this, Human Rights Watch has said that discriminatory, cruel, inhumane, and degrading treatment of over 165 million people in India has been justified on the basis of caste. Some of the attacks include looting and burning hundreds of Dalit households, forcibly denying people of different castes access to polling locations during elections, and people being killed as attempted intimidation. For a more in-depth report on the caste system, you can read the Human Rights Watch report that I mentioned in the description. I think it should go without saying that this way of ranking people is, it's pretty bad, and it shouldn't be a surprise that I put it in the lowest tier. On to the next one. Likes, dislikes, hearts, upvotes and downvotes, I'm told. I don't go on Reddit, retweets, etc. These are all going to be our next item to rank. Okay, so full disclosure, I was originally planning to rank these average, like B or C, but then the most peculiar thing happened on this website, so I might be a little bit biased. That being said, I love them. They're the greatest ranking system ever made. S tier. No, greater than S tier. All head. Yeah, I was pretty annoyed when they removed the dislike button. So let's get to an actual ranking. For some backstory, these buttons were created as a way of allowing people on an online platform to show that they like or dislike a piece of content quickly, while also allowing for a system of ranking things, making it easier for people to find good content. Which were more usable than comments, as they take a longer time to create and don't provide the same voting system, and were also better than unviewable voting systems, which makes finding worthwhile content incredibly difficult, something I wish YouTube would understand. Sorry, wait, no, I don't think they're calling the shots. Something I wish Google would... No, not them either. BlackRock, no, their job is worse. Something I wish the United States federal government... For some good things about this system, everyone is equal in deciding what they do and do not like, making the ranking system a popular vote and allowing it to be more accurate, while also providing important information to give you a quick opinion on if a piece of content is worth consuming. Another thing is that in most cases, it has very little effect on your life. But if you do see a lot of people are disliking something, that system gives you a chance to reflect and grow from the experience. Now for some bad things. The first thing is that it could lead to echo chambers, where people only intake things that they consistently like or agree with, which could lead to some problems like increasing political division and violence. Another problem is that some people may feel compelled to get dopamine gained through likes or positive feedback to the point it's unhealthy, compared to healthy ways of getting dopamine, such as going on walks, talking with friends, or hunting gnomes. Listen, they don't want you to think they're real. But why do avalanche crews need howitzers and explosives, and why are there PMCs in Antarctica? The evidence is... With all these problems out of the way, I'll still give it an A tier because of how it gave each person an equal way of ranking things, and how it allowed people to see if a piece of content was worth consuming. Oh, and here's another thing I should mention. Astrology. To begin, what is astrology? Where is astrology? Who are they? Who gave me this gun? Are you here to steal my... Because of time, I'll only answer one of these. Basically, astrology is a pseudoscience that claims to show information about people's lives based on studying the movements and relative positions of celestial objects. Basically, stars tell me what type of person I am. Now, the reason why I'm ranking this is because there are some people who believe there are traits that you can't remove based on the time you were born, which could be seen as ranking people. I mean, I see it that way, and this is my video. Anyway, astrology has been around for thousands of years, starting around 3000 BC, and for most of its life, it was practiced in cultures as part of many religions. Skipping forward a bit, it began to evolve in what is now called Western astrology with Claudius Ptolemy's book Tetrabiblos, written in the 2nd century AD. Astrology then continued to evolve until it is what we know it as today. Now, in modern Western astrology, they have something called zodiacs. So, what are zodiacs? Long story short, they are believed to represent the 12 basic personality traits and are given to you on the day you're born by which constellation the sun was, and I use this lightly because it doesn't really make any sense, during the moment you were born. Anyway, I won't go over all of these, but here they are. Now for the rank. I think that the main problem with this is that it provides people with a false sense of rationale for their actions, meaning that some people won't try to change their actions with the belief that they cannot, which is something other superstitions usually don't do. So because there isn't any evidence to prove it's real, and because you cannot change when you were born to change your zodiac, but because it doesn't really affect you unless you want it to, asterisk attached to that statement, I'll rank this one between a D and an E. So, one sec. Feudalism is the name of the dominant social system in Europe from the 5th to 12th century, where nobility, slightly well-off people, held land from the crown being whoever had the most brutal army. Then the peasants, that's everyone else, would live on the lord's land and give him allegiance, labor, and a share of what they produce in exchange for military protection. This was done because during the time feudalism was cool, almost everyone's life consisted of eating, working, sleeping, and hoping that the unhinged psychopath that became leader across the river doesn't attach pieces of burning cloth to pigeons and turn your entire town into a historical example of a war crime. So having some protection was nice. Now the question that comes out of this system is whether it was good or effective. First, was it effective? Well, considering that it came to power after a central authority in Europe collapsed, if its goal was to keep some stability, one could argue that it succeeded. But you could also say that this system of rationalizing power by saying God gave it to him led to thousands of wars and forceful labor of millions throughout the decades, perhaps not making it that effective. So I think I'll give this question a maybe. Now for the second question, was it good? This answer is much easier. No. I want to apologize to all the monarchists in the crowd trying to re-establish their stupid empire for how much I don't give a fuck. But unless you won the birth lottery and got to be king or queen, or if you were lucky enough to be an asset to them, life wasn't that great. And by not great, I mean working your entire life on the brink of starvation, never retiring, having your leaders live lavishly on the backs of the thousands of young men they sent to die to gain centimeters of unusable land, and then dying at 34 because they were so inbred they couldn't pronounce diplomacy, nor try it. Wouldn't it be crazy if there was a country that was doing almost all of these things right now? But because you would 100% die if you had almost any disease, sacrificing old ideas like liberty or freedom for safety was an okay deal for them. Also, they didn't really have a choice. But then, major events and advancements changed society and made this form of ranking people fall out of fashion. So now, it's a dead version of ranking people, mostly used in history classes. So, that all being said, with all the problems that have occurred because of it, I'll rank this one an E, giving it slightly higher than the lowest because it doesn't exist anymore and because there's a chance I would be king. Yes, this does mean feudalism is just as bad as astrology. Okay, time for a speedrun to get some ways of ranking people out of the way. Tier lists. Kinda suck to be honest, D tier. All other religious or pseudoscientific ways of ranking people. Just to be clear, I'm talking about systems that rank entire groups of people, like the caste system, or astrology, because I believe that there are more, but I don't want to do research on them. So just to be clear, this isn't religious leaders from like priest to pope or something. Anyway, F. That other way that I just mentioned, because this video is a prison designed as a fractal that I will never escape. C tier, sure, why not? What content they enjoy. Okay, because people can change what they like, S tier. What food they enjoy. This one is kinda like the content one, except for it can leak into culture. Let's call it an A tier. What they use to enjoy content. I'm mostly talking about computers, but this also goes for like movie theaters or anything else. Anyway, do you have a live Tucker reaction on your PC? Yeah. S tier. Sports and athleticism. S tier. Content of someone's character. S tier. Yeah, the CIA killed him and now they post about him on Twitter. Moving on. Racism. F tier. Sexism. I've been thinking about this for a long time. Woman? Quite frankly, I don't agree with the concept. Nationality. Yeah, I wish Eastern Europe was a real place. Alphabetically. Alphabetical arrangement? Good. S tier. Age. Let's say C tier. Military order. This really depends on the country. Some are pretty good at dividing up power and other countries are corrupt. Let's say C again. Credit scores. They're basically designed to show how trustworthy someone is to repay off their debts, with a bit of unintentional discrimination attached. I'll call it D tier. Social credit scores. Now, although this idea is mostly known for the one country that really loves surveillance, it has not been fully implemented there yet. That being said, many other countries have done things that are similar to what a social credit score would be. So I feel like I should say that mass surveillance is a bad idea, and I'm going to rank it F tier. Unless I'm being held in a dystopian future, then it's whatever I told you, please let my family live. Cool transition? Is that you?
Why did you do feudalism and not other political ranking systems?
I don't know. But if that's what you want, let's just do all political ideologies. How hard can that be? So as that schizo post just explained, there are quite a few political ideologies. So to make things simpler, I'm going to take all political opinions and put them into two boxes, labeled democratic and authoritarian. Hey, what about us? We don't believe in a state whatsoever. Where are we meant to go? Ah, the anarchists. That's such a good point. Back from the corners of the internet from whence you came. Okay, so to address the problem, does this cover all ideologies? No. Is this arbitrary? Yeah, but this is meant to be about ranking people, so this will be more of a general political philosophy. With all that being said, let's begin. Democracies rank people. By deciding who gets power and who doesn't through the democratic process, democracies try to rank people in such a way a majority of people agree with the outcome. Of course, there are some asterisks attached to this, but all in all, democratic ideologies try to divide people into positions of power based on what the population wants. Most political opinions that we know as democratic or simply not authoritarian began during or shortly after the Age of Enlightenment from 1715 to 1789, and then evolved into what we know them as now. Along with these ideas of democracy came diversity of opinion. I know, who would have guessed, with questions that would usually be decided by kings or those around him being decided by individuals elected into positions of power. Things like how much money should the government give to the military, what laws should be created, are women humans, small things like that. And this way of ranking people into positions of power generally made things better for the citizens of said countries. But it also came with some problems, the two largest being that without rules on how people can govern, it becomes mob rule, and the second being how fragile it can be, with other sectors in society having to be maintained to keep the status quo. For example, the United States succeeded because it was put into an excellent position, and because its leaders implemented ideas that created a state that was different from the rest of the world. This story of democracy surviving could then be contrasted with many other examples, such as the economic crises and paranoia in France leading to mass murders, the Republic of China collapsing into civil war, or the many other democracies that fell into authoritarianism, showing that although it does have success, without stability it can give other political philosophies the ability to gain power. Not necessarily because they can solve these problems, but because they can crush the ability for the public to know about these problems, which leads us to the alternative to democratic ideologies. Authoritarian ideologies. They also rank people, often many more, almost always poorly, but I'll get into that later. To begin, what are they? To answer this question, we need to define what authoritarianism is, so let's do that. Authoritarian means favoring a concentration of power in a leader or elite that are not constitutionally responsible to the people. This means that an authoritarian state is one that concentrates power in the hands of a small number of individuals who are not responsible to the people they rule over. So, if that's what authoritarianism is, if we find ideologies that are more often to turn to this, then we can define them as authoritarian ideologies. Here is another way of defining them. Wow! Funny color chart! We're ranking these ones. Now that we have that, let's get to the ranking. Authoritarianism is an unstable, economically illiterate, categorically evil way of running a society. I know most people know this, but one of the reasons I'm still continuing to talk about this is because I was looking at some statistics, and I noticed that although democratic ideas are still the most popular in democratic countries, compared to older generations, young people seem to have more people who are okay with authoritarian concepts, which was disappointing, to say the least. For example, if you combine the results from all these democratic countries, 23.7% of people between 16 and 24 felt that army rule was a very good or fairly good political system, while people over 65 said it was good only 12.6% of the time. Or, when asked about democratic political systems, people over 65 said it was fairly bad or very bad 5.8% of the time, while people 16 to 24 said it was bad or very bad 10.9% of the time. And this trend kind of just continues for most of the other questions I could find. And we could go into theories on why this is happening. Personally, I blame MTV, but in reality, it's mostly just a global shift towards authoritarianism, which I hope will shift back in the future. And judging by how authoritarian regimes have operated in the past, from the murder of hundreds of thousands to the mismanagement so disturbing it sounds like an Onion article, I really hope that authoritarianism isn't a defining characteristic of this century. I feel that there's not much to be gained from explaining this further, other than confirming the disturbing facts that a majority of people already know. In conclusion, although democracy has its flaws, in my opinion, everyone who lives under a free and fair democracy should want to preserve it, and by extension, the way it ranks people. If not for the good of your nation or the liberty it provides, then simply for self-preservation. Because if authoritarianism begins, it tends to attract other authoritarians, and there's no guarantee that in the end it will be your ideology and way of ranking people in charge. And it's better to be facing a disappointing election screen than a blood-soaked wall. Anyway, what was I doing? Oh yeah, funny tier list video. Let's rank these A and E tier, respectively. Yeah, that seems good. And that's it. That's all the ways of ranking people that I care about enough to rank. For all those who have watched this far, and for future historians wondering how I could be so wise, is this list arbitrary? Yeah, kinda. But it's a tier list video, I think we all knew it was going to be arbitrary. Now, the reason I made this is because after the last video, I felt that there was a lot of things I could have done better. For example, why am I using this character to represent me? I began using it as a knockoff salmonella, but really looking at him, he looks like a sketch of a war criminal drawn by one of the children he's arming. So long story short, I made this video to try out a few different styles and see what I like doing. I hope you enjoyed the video. Contrary to popular belief, I don't actually disappear the moment this video ends, and if you want proof of that, you can always follow my small section of Angry Bird app. Or don't, that app gets noticeably worse by the day. Anyway, new video coming when it's ready. Have a good one.